2 weeks of just traveling like this, we happened to get at the station where there was a freight train that evacuated people from Belarus. And then we got on that freight train. And there we were already. It's the first time in my life that I saw this porridge. It was called psheno. I really don't know Russian for it. And on that train, on the stations, they would already give us stop at the station and give us something to eat, some psheno or some soup or something. This was already somehow organized. But this was already in the rear of the country. There wasn't this war. But nevertheless, even when we were just on that freight train, there was already bombing, even in these rear places. And then it was on and on and on and on till we got to the Stalingrad district. This was far away, very far. It's the Volga and all that. But certainly we weren't taken to Stalingrad. Well, you know, refugees were taken to little kolkhoz. And well, in that kolkhoz I just lay down and I couldn't do anything after all that. But my friend, she went to work in the fields and she got rationing, you know, a little bit of bread. It was a very, you know, we didn't even know. Before the war, there was already rationing in that kolkhoz. People lived a very poor life before the war even. Somehow, how the Soviets managed to destroy everything is simply a miracle. And then when I got already better and I could walk, so we were advised to go to the nearest little town. It was a Cossack, what they call Cossack Stanitsa. And they told us, they gave us immediately a job to work on a pit, you know. But when we left this, and we agreed immediately, we didn't know what it meant. And one of the, she was a Belarus woman, very nice, a teacher, and we had been together with her in the kolkhoz. She said, girls, and she was older than me, a teacher already, go back and tell them you are unable to work on pits because you have no shoes and you haven't got any clothes. They should supply you with some other job. So we went back and the man was very kind and he called the manager, director of a kind of factory and simply asked him for a kind of charity to take us on to employ us. But certainly we had no Soviet passports. And we couldn't be really trusted, you know. After all, no one knew us perfectly. But we were given odd jobs, for instance, to unload coal. The factory was heated and all. It wasn't the factories of today, where everything is all electronic. Mm-hmm. And, well, carrying, you know, heavy boxes and all that. And we were housed. This was also a very nice way of doing it. There was a Cossack woman, and her son was already on the front. All the male population was already mobilized by that time. And we worked non-stop, 16 hours a day, and without any days off. And but we weren't very hungry there. This I must admit. We had a rationing card and we got certain things to eat, not too full, but not famine. The real famine began later. And then in a year approximately, it was summer. It was in June, if I'm not mistaken. So the Nazis began already bombing Stalingrad. And we could already hear in Urupinsk the bombing. So they decided to evacuate this factory to Almaty. And what you could see on that way was terrible. Children from the besieged Leningrad, they managed somehow to take a group of children out of that besieged Leningrad. And what this a year is not a year, 300 days of siege. No water, no food, no nothing. And those children were all swollen. It was a terrible sight. And in that freight terrain that we were in, that we were already evacuated, it was a great privilege, you know. We didn't have to walk, to go on foot. One of the women had some dried bread, and you know, she threw that dried bread through the window, and the little children were so swollen, they just would rush, you know, to grab that. That was a terrible sight. And then finally we did get to Almaty, but it wasn't the city Almaty, it was on the outsides of Almaty, and we had to begin building the factory there. You know, just building, construction work with bricks and mortar and all that. But at the same time, in the evening, when there was no building, I found out that Almaty was a wonderful city in every respect. And all the I would say, the cultural life from Moscow, from Leningrad, from all over the Soviet Union was somehow concentrated in Almaty. I found out that there was this Institute of Foreign Languages that was evacuated from Moscow. It was the best Moscow Institute with all those teachers. And they arranged evening courses just to study a little bit English. Well, I knew English, well, from school, and I was always interested in languages. So again, we got acquainted, and they just persuaded me to leave the factory, because in the factory there was already also hunger, and students were also hungry, because the rationing was, now it may sound a lot, 300 grams of bread, we don't eat it in a week now, but when you don't have anything, it's nothing. In Almaty, all the people who had flats were made to accept refugees. Well, with me it was a great problem, because I was in the dormitory, there were no places, and when I was admitted to the institute, the director, he was a Kazakh, by the way, he told me immediately, no dormitory. So I somehow managed it.
You had no news.
What news could there be?
Could you imagine the worst? Could you imagine what had happened?
Not quite. But you know, you listened. We listened to the radio. It's not a radio, they called it Tochka, you know, it was in every room. But we couldn't, about the atrocities in general, but you don't want to believe it.
Who told you?
Well, the people, there were still people from Kivartai in Vilna who had come before me. I came to Kivartai, to Vilna, only I finished my semester in Moscow, the first semester, in January, I just gave the last examination, and then I returned, but not to Vilna. I went via Moscow, because I knew I had no one to go to, and my teachers from Almaty, who had already returned to Moscow earlier, because Moscow was already liberated, and by the way, they were mostly Americans who had come during the Depression, and they were very idealistic and communistically, you know, they came to build communism. It was in the early 30s, and we were like a family. They simply adopted me, and when they were already in Moscow, and I went to Vilna through Moscow after graduation. So they didn't let me go to Vilna and to Lita. They say you have no one to go to. And here we are your family, and they got me a very nice job. I was really sorry to leave that job. And due to the efforts of these teachers of mine, I got into that institute, and they even supplied me, which is very important, again with a dormitory. I lived together with the students, certainly, but it was a place, you know. After the war, to have a place means a lot. So eventually, practically, I was sent to Vilna, to the place, but I managed. They usually didn't allow people to go via Moscow. But again, through people whom I gave lessons and all this, they managed to give me this pass to go through Moscow. And when I came to Moscow, and when I visited my teachers, and when they said, you have nowhere to go to, stay with us, extremely nice people, and they established me. And this was a very nice half year in Moscow, you know. Moscow, after the war, Moscow, you can't even imagine what it meant. So Moscow was a happy city. All the best theaters had already returned. The Merchat, that was so good, it's not good anymore. The Mali Theater, the best of the best that could be, were already back. And people would stand in lines to get tickets, because it's difficult, you know, to realize what it all meant.
So when is the last time you saw your parents?
You see, it so happened that after my typhus fever, I did go for a few days to see them, but then the examination session had already begun, and though I was very weak and all that, I decided to return. Well, we knew about the atrocities all the time, but it wasn't said that it was atrocities against Jews. It was said that the atrocities against the local population. And what really happened in Kibbutz, I've only, well, the real thing, how the men were separated the second day from the women. This I only found out when I returned to Vilna in 46, 47, when I began just inquiring. That Lita was the first country where the Nazis managed to do everything with the hands of the local population. My friend, that is my future husband, was just demobilized for the November holiday. And all of a sudden, I had spent the day of the 7th of November it was, together with my friends, with my teachers and all that. And then in the evening I was in the hostel. And he had found me during the war. There was a kind of communication, but he was in the army. And he came to Moscow instead of going to Vilna. And we spent a beautiful 10 days in Moscow. He had got, you know, when they were demobilized, they got some money. And he went to Vilna, and I finished my semester there. And in a couple of months, this was November, December, in 3 months I came to join him. But again, he lived in a family from his town, Simna, who put him up. And he said, well, you can come and they'll put you up too. Such people know what it means not to have, and they had already a flat. But I stayed only one night there, and I said, whatever we can get, we'll go and live in. Now Vilna, you must remember, was destroyed 45%. It was in ruins. When I was already working at the university, we